Hello. My name is Isola, and my sister once held my life in the palm of her hand, then crushed it with a smile. She planted drugs in my car, called the police herself, and watched them cuff me like I was a stranger on the street. She cried for the cameras, told the world I was unstable, while the truth sat buried in her bank accounts and behind closed doors. They believed her. They always did. Until one day, black SUVs pulled up, and everything started to crack. What kind of family does that? And how long had she been planning to erase me completely? It started like any other Thursday. Brisk, bright. The kind of morning that made the city feel clean again after days of pollen and traffic and broken conversations. I was already dressed for the meeting, a navy pencil skirt, light blouse, neutral heels. The blazer stayed in the back seat, as always. Charlotte weather was like a coin toss in spring. And still, for reasons I couldn't name then, something sat too quietly in my chest. The text came the night before, past midnight. Seraphine. Hey, doing me a quick favor? That's all it said, not a greeting, no context. Just that, I hadn't replied until morning. Half out of habit, half from years of guilt-driven autopilot, I answered anyway. Me. What kind of favor? Her response was fast. Seraphine. Drop off an envelope for me at the firm. You're headed that way. I'm swamped. I should have asked more questions, but I didn't. By 9:35, I had pulled into the lot beside the investment firm where we shared silent office space, her in the corner suite, me tucked into the admin hall, next to HR and the copier that constantly jammed. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the envelope she'd handed off that morning, neatly sealed inside a slim leather clutch. Not her usual style, too plain for her, really, but I didn't think about it. Not until later. I opened the glove compartment and tucked it inside, thinking it might be safer there than sliding around the passenger seat. My mind was already on compliance reports and the 10:00 a.m. Zoom call I didn't want to be late for. I stepped out of the car, adjusted the back of my skirt, and closed the door. That's when I heard the sirens. At first, I thought they were headed elsewhere, maybe down the block, a fender bender or some poor college kid busted for expired tags. But they didn't pass me. Instead, they stopped, right behind me. 2 squad cars, 1 SUV, lights spinning, doors flung open like in a movie. Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. It took me a full second to realize they were talking to me. I turned, my palms automatically raised. Is there a problem, officer? Keep your hands visible, now. Okay, I said, trying to stay calm, trying not to look like someone who'd done anything wrong. But isn't that how it goes? People like me, the ones who never cause a scene, who pay their taxes early, who volunteer to make the coffee run, we freeze. I froze. One officer circled my car. Another peered through the windows. A third stepped forward, heavy boots grinding the gravel. We received a call about a possible narcotics delivery involving this vehicle. My breath caught in my throat. Narcotics? I blinked. I think there's been some mistake. We have probable cause, one of them snapped. Open the glove box. The keys were still in my hand. I looked at them, then at him. And before I could move, a voice rang out. It was her. Seraphine. She came rushing across the lot, arms waving like some suburban dramatist in heels too expensive for pavement. There, she yelled. That's the car. Check the glove box. She's been dealing. My body went still. I couldn't even speak. Ma'am, step back, one officer said, holding her at arm's length. She's unstable, Seraphine cried out, pressing her voice for the crowd that had already begun to gather. I've tried to help, but she's been spiraling. Please, just check the car. And they did. He opened the glove box, pulled out the clutch, unzipped it, held it high in the air. A clear plastic bag inside, fine white powder. That was the moment my knees almost gave out. Ma'am, turn around, hands behind your back. No, wait, I stammered. That's not mine. I don't know what that is. Seraphine gave me... Click. Cold metal wrapped my wrists. The officer turned me slightly, not roughly, but not gently either. The murmurs from onlookers swelled, phones up, recording. That part made it real. And then Seraphine leaned in. I told you, she whispered, just loud enough for me. You should have stayed quiet. I stared at her, still trying to understand how we got here, how she could look so sincere, so panicked, to everyone else, while destroying me in plain sight. She's not stable, Seraphine told the officers again, her voice trembling now, perfected for sympathy. I've been trying to get her help. She won't listen. Someone in the crowd said, "A family thing, huh?" I wanted to scream, to explain, to rip the clutch apart and shout, "Look at the prints, check the timestamp, ask me where I've been, anything." But all I said was, "This isn't happening." And then I was being walked toward the cruiser, past faces I didn't recognize, past whispers that would echo online before the hour was done. Just as the back door opened, I heard a voice crackle through a radio clipped to an officer's vest. "Hold up, we've got incoming from Federal, multiple SUVs, fast." I didn't turn my head right away when I heard the radio chatter. I was still half inside that cruiser, the metal edge of the back seat digging into the back of my thighs, my arms cinched tight behind me. My jaw locked, not from fear, but from sheer disbelief. This was how it ended. But then the officer nearest to me paused. He held his hand up mid-motion, touching his earpiece, eyes narrowing toward the street entrance. That's when the engines rolled in, low, steady, deliberate, black SUVs, 3 of them. Clean, unmarked except for the small but unmistakable Federal plates. One after another, they pulled into the lot, forming a silent wall of authority that immediately shifted the atmosphere. The murmurs from the growing crowd hushed. The officer who'd cuffed me blinked, looked at his partner, then back at the convoy. From the lead SUV, a man stepped out, tall, gray suit, sunglasses even though the sun had barely crested the edge of the skyline. He moved with a calm urgency, holding a leather badge folder out in front of him. "Release her, now," he said. "She's under federal protection." The officers hesitated. The man didn't. I said now. My cuffs were off within seconds. No apology, no explanation. Just a clatter of unlocked metal and a hasty step back. I stood slowly, my arms sore, my pulse erratic. Across the lot, Seraphine froze. She had been in full performance mode, tears on cue, one hand clutched to her chest like a grieving widow at a funeral. But now, her face paled. Not from guilt, no, Seraphine didn't do guilt. It was something else, confusion, disorientation, like someone had flipped the script and forgotten to give her the rewrite. The federal agent stepped closer. He leaned toward me and said low enough that only I could hear, "You weren't supposed to call us unless it got worse." I kept my eyes on Seraphine. It just did. He nodded once and turned his head slightly. The sound of shutters and camera clicks rushed in from all sides. Media vans had begun to arrive. Charlotte's morning news had caught wind of an arrest in a business district involving suspected narcotics. Now they had federal SUVs in the frame. That meant drama. That meant clicks. Seraphine tried to step toward me. An officer intercepted her, but she lifted both palms like a helpless saint. "This is all a misunderstanding," she called out, her voice too loud, too practiced. "I was trying to help her. I've been worried for a while. She's not well." I tilted my head slightly. She wasn't talking to me. She was performing for the crowd. She was playing the role of the brave, heartbroken sister again, the one who tried to help the wayward sibling but was ignored, the one who saw signs but didn't want to believe it. A microphone was suddenly pushed in her direction. She smiled sadly, eyes glossy. "I just want her to get the help she needs." Then she leaned in close, whispering so only I could hear. "Even if they let you go now, good luck finding your reputation." That was the part that landed hardest. Not the lie, not the betrayal, but the smug certainty in her voice, as if she still believed this entire scene, this twisted little play of hers, was going to end with her standing in the spotlight and me forgotten in the wings. 20 minutes later, I was inside a federal vehicle. I didn't ask where we were going. I didn't care. My ears were still ringing from the news vans, the cameras, the strangers recording every second on their phones like it was entertainment. I sat in silence as the SUV moved through the city, the agent beside me saying nothing, just typing something into a secure tablet. My phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out, hands still trembling slightly. There were already missed calls, a few texts. One from HR. Please check your email regarding your current employment status. Another from a number I didn't recognize. Is it true? Did your sister really turn you in? The SUV stopped outside a secure federal facility I recognized from briefings, not personal visits. As we walked inside, I glanced down at my phone again. The notifications kept coming. News alerts, social media tags, a dozen mentions in Reddit threads. And then, finally, I opened my email. Subject: Administrative Leave Notification. Ms. Tvei, due to ongoing legal attention and recent media reports involving your name, you are hereby placed on immediate administrative leave, pending further review by our executive board. This is not a termination, but a precautionary measure to protect the integrity of the firm and all associated partners. We wish you clarity and resolution in this matter. Human Resources, Greer Financial. I stared at the words for several long seconds, not surprised, just done. When the agent, his name was Nolan, I think, led me into a private room, I barely registered the shift in space. White walls, one long table, water bottles no one touched. He sat. I remained standing. She's winning, I said quietly. You realize that, don't you? She planted drugs in my car, had me arrested in public, and now I'm being punished for it while she's on TV crying into microphones. Nolan looked up from the tablet. She's not winning, she's accelerating. Same thing. He shook his head. Not to us. A few moments of silence passed before he added, She's leveraging the mental health angle. Her PR team already pushed a narrative. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. What kind of narrative? Nolan slid his tablet toward me. I glanced down. The headline read, Charlotte woman detained in suspected drug incident. Family expresses concerns about her mental state. The subheading was worse. We've tried to help her for years, says her sister, local CEO Seraphine Greer. Sometimes the strongest ones break hardest. I stared at the screen without blinking. Photos below the text showed me being handcuffed. Another from college. Someone had unearthed a photo of me during a debate, tears in my eyes after losing a round I cared too much about. The caption, Emotional patterns, early signs? I set the tablet down gently. This is what she does, I said. She makes the lie sound like a warning. She's clever, Nolan admitted, but clever doesn't mean invincible. I looked at him. You don't know her like I do. He leaned back. Then tell us everything. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. Another email. From my department chair. Isola, given the media attention and ongoing investigation, the board has decided to suspend your license pending internal review. This is temporary, but necessary. We hope for a swift resolution. I closed the email, locked my phone, slid it back into my purse. Then I looked down at my wrist. The old watch, my mother's, was still there. Worn, a little cracked at the edge, but still ticking. I tightened the strap and breathed in. If Seraphine wanted to erase me, she'd have to work harder. I wasn't disappearing this time. I stood there in my living room long after the federal car had dropped me off. I hadn't turned on the lights. I didn't make coffee. I didn't even take off my shoes. The house was too quiet, as if it, too, was waiting to see what I'd do next. Outside, the afternoon had slipped into a heavy gray drizzle, the kind of Carolina rain that came without warning, soft but constant. It tapped gently against the window panes like it had something important to say but didn't want to interrupt. I walked into my office, closed the door behind me, and locked it. Not that anyone was coming, but locking it made me feel like I had a sliver of control left. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat at my desk, staring at the laptop as if it might offer answers. My phone was buzzing with missed calls, emails, group messages I wasn't ready to face. Instead, I clicked open a browser and typed my own name into the search bar. And there it was. Isola Vey. Trending in the local news cycle. Dozens of articles, screenshots from the arrest. Comment sections filled with strangers dissecting my posture, my facial expression, my silence. Looks guilty as hell. She's been off for years. Knew something was up. That sister, Seraphine, class act, hope she's okay. I clicked off and leaned back in the chair. That woman, my own sister, had crafted a narrative so smooth, so polished, that I looked like the side story in my own tragedy. And the worst part? It wasn't the first time. My eyes drifted to the bookshelf in the corner. Nestled between old journals and family photo albums was a small wooden box. One Mom had given me just after her second cancer remission. I kept it locked for years, more out of habit than caution. Now, though, my hands moved before I could stop them. I retrieved the key from the drawer, unlocked the box, and pulled out a thin stack of papers bundled in a worn ribbon. The first document on top was a copy of the estate transfer agreement, the one I'd signed 3 weeks after the funeral. I closed my eyes, and the memory came rushing in. The house had still smelled like lilies and cold casseroles. People were dropping by with pie and false sympathy. I hadn't slept in days. Grief had made everything feel underwater. And that's when Seraphine had shown up. She wore Mom's favorite scarf like it was a badge of honor, said we needed to take care of the legal side of things so we could move forward. I remember her words clearly. What I don't remember is arguing. She'd brought Adam Kwan with her, our family's longtime lawyer. He laid out papers on the kitchen table, slid them across without blinking. "They're just temporary," Seraphine said, her tone breezy, "until we figure out how to handle the business side." Adam didn't correct her. I'd signed, didn't read them, didn't question. Later, buried in the footnotes, I'd find a clause, a one-sentence trap buried under legalese. All fiduciary and operational rights irrevocably transferred to Seraphine Greer upon signing. Irrevocably. She hadn't needed my signature, she needed my silence, and I'd given her both. A tear slipped down my cheek, but I wiped it away fast. I wasn't going to break down again over a document. I'd already done enough of that in private. I moved to the next memory before I could spiral. The company's anniversary gala, an event that, in hindsight, was practically designed to humiliate me. That night, Seraphine had asked me to wear something strong but not distracting. Her way of saying, "Don't outshine me." The ballroom had been filled with donors, clients, glossy smiles, and too much perfume. I was seated 2 rows behind the front table, strategic, not accidental. And then the awards began. I remember the category, Operational Excellence. My name had been in every quarterly report. My efficiency models had saved the company over $200,000 in under a year. And the award for Operational Excellence goes to Clarissa Greer. Polite applause followed. Clarissa, Seraphine's new assistant, stood up in shock. Real shock. She hadn't known. That much was clear. But she walked up, took the plaque, smiled for the photo. I looked toward Seraphine. She clapped, eyes shining like a mother at graduation. She didn't look at me. Later, she'd blame it on a clerical mix-up. Said I should take it in stride and not make things awkward. A week later, they issued a correction in the internal newsletter, buried between an announcement about elevator maintenance and a cafeteria menu update. It wasn't the mix-up that stung, it was the message. "You don't matter here." I blinked out of the memory and stared back at the stack of papers. There were more. Notes. Seraphine had slipped into my inbox over the years, documents she'd asked me to review real quick before rushing them off to finance. Half the time, I hadn't looked too closely. Trusted her. Trusted the title of sister to mean something. I gathered them all now, made copies, scanned them into a folder on my hard drive, labeled it, "Not Today, Seraphine." Then I reached for my phone again. This time, I didn't scroll, I didn't search. I opened my contacts, found one name I hadn't spoken aloud in almost a year, Darla Mendez. She was Seraphine's shadow for nearly 6 years, knew the codes, saw the blind spots. She'd left abruptly last fall, something about burnout and grad school. But I remembered the way she'd looked at me at that last board meeting, like she wanted to say something but didn't. I tapped her name and hit call. 1 ring, 2, then a voice, tired, hesitant. "Hello?" I inhaled slowly. "Darla, it's Isola." "I know it's been a while, but I need to talk." There was silence, no breathing, no clicks, just the weight of too many things unsaid. Then she whispered, "It's time, isn't it?" I closed my eyes. It is. The line went dead before I could say anything more. Darla didn't hang up abruptly, but the silence between us was too weighted, too familiar, like she'd been holding that "it's time" in her mouth for far too long. I stayed still for a few seconds, letting the words settle. Then I glanced at the time, 6:12 p.m., and texted her the address of a quiet cafe just off East Boulevard. She didn't respond. That didn't surprise me. Outside, the drizzle had thickened into a steady rain, tapping harder against the windows now. I watched it for a moment, then pushed up from the desk. If I was going to walk into that meeting, I needed to be ready. I went to the cabinet in the corner of the office, the one most people would think held spare toner or business receipts. I unlocked the bottom drawer and pulled out an old digital recorder wrapped in a faded yellow dish towel. Mom gave it to me when I moved into my first apartment, said, "Keep this for the things people will one day swear they never said." At the time, I thought she meant it as a joke. Looking back now, I think it was her version of a survival kit. I sat back down and flipped through the files. Most were years old, recordings of meetings, phone calls with vendors, voicemails from our mother, but one caught my eye. Seraphine, Feb. 19, 2021. My stomach turned before I even hit play. The voice that came through the speaker was unmistakable, crisp, elegant, just slightly bored. "I'm not saying we lock her up, that would look bad, but if we can get her flagged, just something mild, depression, anxiety, PTSD, whatever, make it easier to pull rank if things get messy." A pause. Then her laugh, small, quiet, like a wine glass tapping against marble. "She trusts me too much to read the paperwork anyway." I didn't realize my hands were shaking until the recorder slipped slightly and bumped against the desk. That was it. That's why Mom had kept pushing me toward therapy that year. That's why every conversation about estate decisions ended with Seraphine offering to help me understand what was best. This wasn't about love. It never had been. She hadn't just manipulated the business or the narrative. She'd manipulated the truth I'd built my whole sense of self on. I closed the recorder and stood up, almost too fast. I paced for a minute, then stopped. Breathing shallow, heart racing. But I didn't cry. I was past that now. Instead, I opened the printer tray and began pulling together every document I'd been reviewing, every shady form, every edited financial report with my signature forged or coerced. I printed a transcript of the audio. I grabbed a flash drive, transferred the original recording and its backup. I put it all in a small black box. No labels, no drama, just the truth. Then I walked to my bedroom, changed into jeans, flats, and a hooded jacket. I pulled my hair into a low bun and looked at myself in the mirror. "You said no one would believe me," I murmured. "But I'm not here to be believed. I'm here to be undeniable." It was almost 7 p.m. by the time I left the house. The rain had cooled the air enough to fog the windows of parked cars. I drove through quiet streets lined with townhomes and tall oaks, their leaves slick and dark under the streetlights. The cafe was mostly empty when I arrived. I chose a seat in the back, away from the front windows, facing the door. I didn't order anything, didn't take off my jacket, just waited. At 7:08, Darla walked in. She looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders hunched, oversized coat, hair damp at the ends. She spotted me and hesitated, then walked over, pulling the chair out quietly. "I wasn't sure you'd come," I said, voice even. "I wasn't either," she replied. We sat in silence for a few seconds before she added, "You know she'll burn us both if this goes public." I nodded. "I'm aware." "She has friends in state finance, real ones, not just press connections." "I'm not asking you to make a statement," I said. "I'm asking you to verify something." Her eyes flicked to the black box sitting beside my bag. She said nothing. "I found a recording," I continued. "From February 2021. She talked about pushing a diagnosis on me, about making it easier to discredit me legally." Darla's face didn't move, but her hands curled slightly on the table. "She said that," I added. "She laughed when she said it." "I believe you," she said quietly, "because I was there." I didn't breathe. I was in the hallway, outside her office. She didn't know the intercom was still live. I heard the whole thing. You didn't say anything then. She gave me a raise 2 days later, Darla said. And a new car. Said it was a thank you for loyalty. We both sat in the weight of that for a moment. I have documents too, she added. Drafts she asked me to shred. One of them was a fake therapy referral with your name on it. Do you still have them? I keep copies of everything, she said. I have a kid. I don't leave anything to chance. A server approached to ask if we wanted anything. We both shook our heads. She'll come after you, I warned. Harder than she ever did me. She already did, Darla said. That's why I left. We exchanged numbers. I handed her a copy of the transcript and one USB. She tucked it deep into her coat pocket without looking. As we stood to leave, I hesitated. Why now? I asked. Why help me now? Darla looked me dead in the eye. Because the last time someone stood up to her, they disappeared. I don't want that to happen again. Not to you. I drove home slower than I usually would. The rain had lightened, but everything outside felt muted, dim. Like the city itself was holding its breath. When I got home, I walked straight to my desk and composed a short message. To Seraphine. Subject, we need to talk. I'm not asking. Sent. A few minutes later, the reply came. From Seraphine. Subject, careful. Careful, Isola. If you come for me, I won't hold back. The message stared at me from my screen for a long moment, her warning like a loaded weapon, short and sharp. Careful, Isola. If you come for me, I won't hold back. I didn't flinch. Instead, I shut the laptop, zipped the box shut, and walked to the kitchen. I brewed coffee, not because I needed caffeine, but because the smell grounded me. Steam rose from the mug, curling into the quiet corners of the house. It was barely past 5. The rain had stopped sometime after midnight, but the sky still carried its weight. That sticky post-storm stillness. By 5:45 a.m., I had packed everything into a plain black satchel, my backup flash drive, printed files, a copy of the transcript, and that digital recorder now doubled in importance. Then I changed into a clean gray blouse and slacks, pulled my hair into a low twist, and slipped on sneakers instead of heels. I wasn't going to impress anyone. I was going to survive what was coming. At 6:10 sharp, a black government vehicle pulled up to my driveway. Not a word was said as I stepped in. The man in the driver's seat gave a tight nod. We drove in silence, cutting through the still dim edges of Charlotte, out past the newer developments, and toward an industrial park I'd never noticed before. We pulled up to a beige building with no signage, no identifying markers, just a single keypad at the entrance and an American flag tucked into the corner of a chain-link fence. Inside, it was as sterile as I expected. Polished concrete floors, white walls, fluorescent lighting humming overhead. No clocks, no windows. The agent led me down a hallway and opened a steel door. Cassian was already inside. He looked unchanged, a little older, maybe, but that same stillness sat around him like a tailored suit. He didn't stand, just watched me walk in like he'd been expecting me all along. Good morning, he said evenly. Is it? He didn't answer. I sat across from him, set the satchel on the table, and folded my hands. You broke protocol, he said. You weren't supposed to contact her directly. She had me arrested in front of a shopping center, I said flatly. I'd say protocol was already shattered. She's escalating. We had a timeline. She threw me to the wolves on live television. Cassian leaned back in his chair. She's not as in control as she thinks. I tilted my head. That's easy to say from your side of the camera. He didn't respond right away. Finally, he tapped a file in front of him. Your intel is solid. You've built a case that's hard to poke holes in, but it's not bulletproof. You have allegations, documents, testimony. We need more. Something that ties the personal betrayal to the financial corruption. Something that proves malicious intent, not just mismanagement. You mean something louder than her crying on cue? He gave a dry smile. Exactly. We spent the next hour going over everything I'd collected, Every forged signature, every transferred account under shell names, every fabricated invoice that seemed to connect back to a handful of charities Seraphine advised but didn't actually fund. Each piece of paper was a breadcrumb, and I'd laid a path so long I forgot how much of it I'd walked alone. When the briefing ended, the other agents left the room, leaving just me and Cassian. He hesitated, then said quietly, "Why did you keep doing it? After everything?" I didn't look at him. I stared down at my hands. Because people like her always get away with it. Because she taught me that silence isn't peace, it's control. And because I knew one day you'd come back for the truth. I had to have something worth handing over. That last part hung between us for a beat too long. He shifted in his chair. "I never stopped watching, you know. You weren't alone." I met his eyes, but I didn't say anything. Some truths don't need acknowledgement. They just need to be heard. By mid-morning, I was back at my temporary desk inside the facility, a plain cubicle, no nameplate. I asked for access to the media team's internal logs. They hesitated. I didn't. Within 20 minutes, I had what I needed: footage, timestamps, media statements from Seraphine's PR team, and a dossier of every leak to the press with source indicators. Most of it had come from a dummy email linked to a private server registered under a name I recognized from childhood, our grandmother's maiden name. Subtle. Too subtle to be a coincidence. I compiled my own press memo, not a defense, not a denial, but a statement of intent. A list of patterns, dates, quotes, financial figures, no drama, just facts. When I was done, I hit send. Not to the media, not yet. First, I sent it to Seraphine. Subject line: "You don't control the story anymore." No body text. I stared at the screen for a moment, then whispered to myself, "This time, she doesn't control the narrative. I do." A knock on the door pulled me out of the moment. One of the junior agents leaned in, a sheet of paper in hand. "Isola," he said, "you're going to want to see this." I took the paper and scanned it quickly. "Darla's ready. She asked for immunity. She's turning." I folded the paper slowly. The air in the room shifted, like something unspoken had just passed through it. This was it, the next phase. I met Darla just after 1 in the afternoon. The sun had pushed through the morning clouds, casting long, sharp shadows on the sidewalk outside the cafe. It was the kind of quiet place you'd miss if you blinked while driving past, a mom-and-pop setup tucked behind a nursery shop, with ivy crawling up the brick walls and mismatched chairs on the patio. She was already there when I arrived, seated at the farthest table inside, her coat still on, fingers wrapped tightly around a paper cup. Her eyes darted toward the window when I walked in, then back down at the coffee. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. I slid into the seat across from her. "You came alone?" she asked. "Yes. You?" She gave a faint nod. "I parked 2 blocks away, just in case." The tension in her posture wasn't new. I remembered it well. How she always seemed on alert during staff meetings. How she flinched when Seraphine's voice carried across the hall. She didn't look like a traitor. She looked like someone who'd been holding her breath too long. "I won't waste your time," I began, keeping my voice low but steady. "I know she made you do things, sign things, cover things." She didn't deny it. She just sipped her drink slowly, then reached into her purse. From a small inner pocket, she pulled out a flash drive and placed it between us like it was made of glass. "She made me alter financial records," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Invoices, payroll, donation logs for those fake charities she funneled money through." I didn't reach for the drive yet. "How long?" "Over a year." I didn't know how deep it went until I saw the overseas wire transfers. She looked down at her cup. "You remember Global Partners? That nonprofit she said she was mentoring?" I nodded slowly. "The one in Belize." "It doesn't exist." I traced the EIN. Turns out it was deactivated 5 years ago. She revived the name and used it to launder money from private donors. I even printed the fake receipts. She told me, "Make it clean, Darla. Make it like we never touched it." I inhaled through my nose. "And you kept the records." "I had to," she said quickly. "At first it was just fear. But after what she did to you, after the arrest, I realized she'd do it to me, too. Or worse, pin it all on me and smile while I drown. I leaned forward. Will you say that on record? She hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. If I get immunity. That's already in the works. She pushed the flash drive toward me. It's all there, copies of everything. Emails, spreadsheets, audio files, too. She didn't know I recorded calls. I wasn't trying to be malicious. I was trying to stay alive. You did the right thing, I said, and meant it. The server approached, and we both shook our heads. Neither of us had touched the drinks. We walked out together a few minutes later, parting at the sidewalk. She didn't look back. I got into the car, slipped the flash drive into the console, and texted Cassian. Got it, we're ready. By the time I returned to the safe house, the sun had dipped again behind a curtain of soft gray. It was quiet, too quiet for what had just happened. Cassian met me at the door, and I handed him the drive. She flipped? He asked. She flipped, I said, and she has receipts. He didn't smile, but his shoulders loosened a little. Good, we're getting closer. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. He answered, and I watched the color in his face shift. Not fear, something sharper. Understood, he said, and hung up. We have another problem. What now? Silas, the school counselor called us. I blinked. Seraphine's son? Cassian nodded. He told the counselor something, drew a picture. He walked me to the back room and opened a folder. Inside was a scanned image, crayon scribbles on white paper, a silver car, a woman with long dark hair, a purse being placed into the front seat. I stared at it for a long moment. He told the counselor, that's my mom. She said if we put it in Aunt Isola's car, we'd be safe now. My breath caught. He saw it? I asked quietly. Cassian nodded. He didn't understand what he saw, but he remembered it. And now we've got a minor witness tied directly to the act. They'll crucify her for this, I said. Cassian looked at me evenly. She crucified herself. You just held the mirror. Later that evening, I sat in front of the camera. They had set up a temporary briefing room, a stark white wall, a single flag, a microphone that caught every breath. I wore a black blouse and pulled my hair back. I didn't want to look polished. I wanted to look honest. The red light blinked on. I looked into the lens and spoke. My name is Isola Vey, and I was silenced for years. I paused. My sister, Seraphine Greer, isn't just a successful businesswoman. She's the architect of a system built on gaslighting, fraud, and public betrayal. She's used family, fear, and financial influence to discredit anyone who questioned her authority, including me. I glanced down at the folder in my lap, then held it up. I have proof, and this time, it's public. Behind me, Cassian distributed sealed evidence packets to the press representatives. Inside were copies of Darla's testimony, the financial breakdown, the email trails, the images. Everything. I didn't wait for questions. I stood, nodded once, and walked out of frame. By the time I returned to the hallway, Cassian had already received an email from Seraphine's attorneys. Subject: Legal action intent. You are hereby subpoenaed to appear in a countersuit for defamation and damages. I read the subject line and exhaled slowly. They want to sue me? I said, handing the tablet back. Cassian raised an eyebrow. Then I'll show them what the truth really costs. The courthouse buzzed like a beehive before a thunderstorm. You could feel the tension crawling under your skin, the kind of electricity that doesn't come from nerves alone, but from knowing the truth is about to make a mess no one can sweep under the rug. I stepped through the glass doors with Cassian a few paces behind me, his presence quiet but unwavering. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say. In the hallway, reporters lined up like hawks on a power line, their cameras, lenses, and questions aimed not just at me, but at the moment. They knew this wasn't just a court appearance. It was the beginning of a reckoning. We reached the courtroom at 9:02 a.m. Her team was already there. Seraphine sat beside her lawyers like nothing had happened. Her hair pulled back, makeup immaculate, pearls draped over her collarbone like armor. She didn't look at me, but I saw the twitch in her jaw when I walked past. The suit was a subtle shade of cream, understated, innocent. But her eyes? They were sharp enough to slice through concrete. As soon as I took my seat, her lead attorney stood and handed the court clerk a manila folder with the arrogance of a man handing over a prize catch. "Your Honor," he said, "we move to proceed with the defamation countersuit against Ms. Vey, who has made numerous unsubstantiated and damaging claims, publicly and privately, against our client." The judge raised an eyebrow and looked toward me. "I'm aware of the claim," I said, "and I have no intention of walking that back. I just hope Mr. Callahan here is prepared to have this conversation under oath." There was a ripple in the gallery. Cassian, seated behind me, didn't move, but I knew he was watching every detail. We began. I handed the court clerk a thick binder filled with spreadsheets, email threads, notarized witness statements, and offshore transfer records. "This," I told the judge, "is a financial trail connecting Seraphine Greer to over $2.3 million in misappropriated funds, routed through shell companies tied to defunct nonprofits, all of which she signed off on personally." The forensic accountant stepped up next. His testimony was clean, methodical, and brutal. We traced over 17 unique transactions routed through 5 different LLCs, all of which were either inactive or created under assumed identities. The common thread? Approval signatures from Seraphine Greer. There was a pause. A long one. The kind that presses against your lungs. And then the sound. Gasps. Audible. Her attorneys tried to object, tried to pivot. One even claimed the documents were forged. But the evidence was clear. Seraphine didn't flinch, but I could see her blinking faster. Her fingers dug slightly into the polished wood of the table. She still didn't look at me. The judge leaned forward. "Miss Fay, would you like to proceed with a claim for damages?" I stood slowly. Every eye turned to me. The press held their breath. Her lawyers waited to strike. But I said only this. "No, I'm not here for money, or headlines, or revenge." I looked at Seraphine. "I'm here because silence has a cost, and I've paid enough." I paused. "I want one thing. For the people who've been silenced, manipulated, and erased, to be believed." The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The silence said everything. Even the judge leaned back, lips pressed tight, not in judgment, but in something closer to understanding. Behind me, I heard Cassian exhale for the first time in an hour. Seraphine finally looked up, and for a second, just a flicker, I saw it. Not fear, not regret, but disbelief. She still thought this day would never come. Court adjourned at 11:28 a.m. As we walked down the courthouse steps, the storm broke loose, not in the sky, but in the swarm of media that waited outside. Seraphine walked a few paces ahead of her attorneys. Her pace was clipped, deliberate. She was halfway down the steps when the first question rang out. "Ms. Greer, do you deny planting evidence in your sister's car?" She didn't answer. "Miss Greer, were the medical records falsified? Do you dispute the voice recordings?" She stepped faster, and then it happened. Her heel caught the edge of the stone step, snapped sideways, and she stumbled. Briefly, but visibly. Cameras exploded. Flashes popped. A dozen shutters clicked like gunfire in perfect unison. She caught herself before she fell, but it didn't matter. Her perfect image had cracked. That evening, I sat on the sofa in my living room. The TV was on, but muted. The footage played again, Seraphine losing her footing, being ushered into a black SUV, her face pale beneath the powder. My phone buzzed beside me. "Cassian. Tomorrow's the board vote. They're moving to remove her." I stared at the screen. The same board that once printed my name wrong on an award, the same board that let her speak over me in meetings, that watched her bury me under fake concern and half-truths. I typed 2 words. Me. Let them. The boardroom at Greer Financial had never looked more sterile. White linen covered the buffet tables, wine glasses stood in perfect rows on silver trays, And up above, the vaulted ceiling carried every whispered word like a secret trying to escape. It was the company's annual Legacy Night, the event Seraphine had once claimed would become a cornerstone of corporate culture. For the past 6 years, she'd been the centerpiece of it all. Award recipient, keynote speaker, and quiet puppet master behind every polished statement and curated photograph. But this year, her seat at the front was empty. Technically, she was in the room. Seated 3 places from the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by her attorneys and trying too hard to look unbothered, she wore a muted blue suit, the kind of color someone might call graceful, though her expression looked anything but. I wasn't there. I had no interest in watching it unfold in person. I didn't need applause. I needed closure. And that was something I could witness from the comfort of my own home. So I sat on my living room couch with my laptop open, the live stream already buffering, and the volume just loud enough to catch every word. The broadcast began with a few pleasantries, remarks from board members, carefully chosen language about evolution, challenges, and vision for the future. Then came the part everyone had been waiting for. Board chairwoman Elise Walker stood. "This isn't a hearing," she said, interrupting Seraphine's counsel before he could launch into one of his pre-approved remarks. "This is a vote. We're not debating guilt. We're determining leadership eligibility and public trust." Seraphine didn't speak. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she sat straighter in her chair, still clinging to the illusion of control. She had built this company from the inside out, rewriting history, reassigning credit, erasing her competition one polite smile at a time. She didn't expect this board to turn on her. Not publicly. Not after everything she'd orchestrated. But the damage wasn't theoretical anymore. It was federal. Headlines, depositions, whistleblower protection, Darla's testimony. My name. Ballots were handed out. You could feel the hesitation in the room, not because anyone doubted her involvement, but because letting go of someone like Seraphine Greer meant admitting the company had enabled her all along. One by one, the slips of paper disappeared into the collection box. Moments later, Elise read the results aloud. 9 in favor, 1 against, motion passes. The room fell into a hushed stillness. Seraphine didn't blink, but her shoulders, always so square, dipped ever so slightly. Her nameplate was quietly removed. A junior assistant approached and took the printed program from the podium. Another reached for the portraits that hung behind the presentation screen. I watched as her face was replaced with the company logo. It didn't matter how polished her statement would have been. No one asked for it. No one waited to hear it. They had already chosen silence. The program continued. Drinks were served. Glasses clinked. And then, without warning, the lights dimmed. A new announcement came from the podium. It wasn't on the schedule. I could tell by the surprised looks around the table. Elise returned to the microphone. Tonight, we had originally planned to recognize Ms. Seraphine Greer as a pillar of excellence, but in light of recent developments, the board has chosen to honor a different kind of legacy, one built on quiet integrity and difficult truths. She gestured toward the far end of the room. A velvet curtain slid back, revealing a large framed portrait. My portrait. Me, standing in front of the old company building, arms crossed, sunlight on my face, the Greer financial sign just out of focus behind me. Isola Vey, Elise said, who despite extraordinary personal cost, chose truth over convenience. And in doing so, restored a level of trust and transparency this company had long forgotten. I leaned back into the couch and touched the small gold locket at my neck. It had belonged to my mother. She used to wear it with everything, even after the clasp stopped holding properly. I'd found it in the drawer beside her old recipe box months after she passed. I hadn't worn it until today, not because I was waiting for the moment, but because I finally believed I'd survived enough to carry it. Cassian texted me then. One line. "They unveiled your portrait." I smiled. "I know," I typed back. "I watched it live." An hour later, the stream ended and the lights in the boardroom dimmed. People filtered out. Seraphine, I imagined, had already left, but she wasn't going home. I knew from earlier that afternoon that she had been remanded to a holding facility pending further investigation. Not charged yet, but close, and like clockwork, she tried again. This time, from the facility, she submitted a written request to have a pre-recorded statement played at the next company-wide meeting. One of her attorneys sent it in, titled with all the usual flair. Clarification from Ms. Greer, restoring the truth. The board's response? One sentence. Request denied. We respect your silence. I closed the laptop gently and sat in the quiet. There were no cheers, no champagne, no dramatic monologue, just peace. And it was enough. The wind had turned cooler that morning. Not sharp, not biting, just enough to remind you that summer was gone and something quieter had taken its place. I parked by the old cemetery just after 8, leaving the car idling long enough for the radio to finish a piano piece before I switched it off. My boots sank softly into the leaf-covered path as I walked through the rows of gravestones. Late autumn in Charlotte had always been my favorite. The kind of stillness that didn't ask questions. The kind that let you breathe. I found my mother's stone beneath the tall oak where it had always been, but it looked different now. Cleaner, like someone else had been by recently. I knelt, brushing a few leaves aside before placing a small bouquet of white mums down gently at the base. I kept my promise, I whispered. I didn't disappear. The quiet stretched around me, as if the air itself paused to listen. I sat on the cold stone bench nearby, watching the wind rustle the trees. Memories drifted in and out without warning, Seraphine's voice echoing inside the courthouse, the cold snap of the cuffs on my wrists, the boardroom vote, the click of camera shutters, the day her heel broke in front of the press. They didn't haunt me the way they used to, they just existed, like chapters I'd reread too many times, no longer shocked by the ending. By the time I returned home, the sun had climbed higher, casting soft shadows along the kitchen wall. I set my purse down, poured myself a glass of water, and walked into the study. The laptop sat where I'd left it, lid closed, the faint outline of fingerprints across the surface. I opened it, logged in, and clicked the drafts folder. 15 emails sat there, all of them addressed to Seraphine, none of them sent. Some were long, pages of rage and grief and questions that had no answers. Some were barely more than a line. One simply said, I miss you. But I miss the sister I thought you were. I hovered over the delete button, then closed the laptop instead. There were things that deserved to be spoken and things that didn't. Some silences, I'd come to learn, were a kind of mercy. Later that afternoon, I received something in the mail, a small envelope, no return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a hand-drawn card, crayons on construction paper, a sketch of a tree, a woman with dark hair standing next to a boy. Underneath, in uneven handwriting, Auntie Sola, thank you for telling the truth. I want to be brave like you. Silas. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't expected. I framed it that evening, hung it in my hallway between a framed quote from Maya Angelou and an old photograph of Mom holding me as a baby. Cassian stopped by just before sunset. He didn't say much, just brought over a 6-pack of ginger beer and a bag of popcorn. We sat on the porch as the last of the daylight sank behind the trees. Do you feel vindicated? He asked after a while, his voice low, eyes on the horizon. I thought about it. No, I said. I feel free. That's better. He nodded. She's still trying to spin something from inside. I know, I said, but there's nothing left for her to twist. Silence returned between us, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that came with knowing nothing else needed to be said. The next morning, I took a walk through the old neighborhood. It had changed some, new siding on houses, a few more cars in the driveways, but the bones of it were the same. The sidewalk still cracked near the corner where we used to play kickball. The smell of someone's fireplace lingered in the air. As I passed a group of early walkers, one woman, gray hair, coat pulled tight, paused and looked straight at me. We saw what they did, she said gently. We believe you. I smiled. Thank you. She nodded and walked on, and I kept walking too. I reached the end of the block, turned the corner, and paused. The street ahead was lined with golden leaves and soft light, the kind that made you believe maybe, just maybe, you were allowed to keep going. My hand rose almost instinctively, fingers brushing the small pendant around my neck. The one I'd worn every day since the trial ended. My mother's. A symbol. A memory. A tether to something honest. Some wounds don't close. But they stop bleeding. And that's enough for now. Some truths take years to rise. And sometimes, they come from the people we least expect. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when you stop being silent. When you stop trying to prove your worth to the people who built a world around erasing it. Have you ever been made to feel like the villain in your own family? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And if stories like this speak to you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come. Much more.